I have been studying the book of James, and we're all the way in chapter 3, verses 13 through 18 now. And this section talks about two different kinds of wisdom. So the first is earthly wisdom, and then the second is wisdom from above. These two different kinds of wisdom are distinct, and we're going to go ahead and talk about that this morning. So it's going to be a challenge for us to analyze ourselves and our lives and see, are we relying on earthly wisdom or wisdom from above? And we're going to be studying that this morning. So James explains and clarifies about how we use wisdom, depending on which kind. So I just added this, and this is like a test on wisdom. And the question is to ask yourself, what kind of wisdom do you have? So James gives a test on faith. So some people are like, I have faith, and they don't do anything to show it. And James is challenging the believers. Show me your faith. It's useless unless you have works. If you don't have any kind of works, you have a dead faith. That's what he just previously talked about. And now he's basically giving the same kind of thing. Now he's giving a test on wisdom. He's saying, show me your wisdom. Unless you have something, you have false wisdom. So in chapter 2, he talked about a test on faith, and now he's giving a test on wisdom. That blank is going to help us this morning. We're going to fill it in by the end. Understand this kind of wisdom that shows that a person has true wisdom. Shows that it's a real wisdom. That kind of wisdom is worthless. Without works to back it up with false wisdom. And in James chapter 1, verse 5, he talked about wisdom already. He said, if any of you lacks wisdom, this is something you don't have enough of. If you do not possess wisdom, it says, let him ask God. God will give generously. Don't be ashamed to ask God. Go ahead and ask him. God is happy to grant wisdom. It will be given to him from above. So James emphasizes this, and that wisdom is an important key in this verse here. God is the one who gives wisdom. That's our first important point this morning before we continue on with our message. So first we need to understand that there are two different kinds of wisdom, and many Christians can try to intermingle God's wisdom with the world's wisdom. Is it true or false wisdom? And we have to distinguish between the two this morning. Okay, how can we recognize the right or wrong kinds of wisdom? And so James is going to go ahead and he's going to give us a warning to believers to make sure that we understand wisdom. He's going to go in depth into these different kinds of wisdom. I mean, there's a whole list of the different options for wisdom. I looked at the Greek word and also the dictionary definition, and each one has different meanings. Wisdom can be involved in skill, like knowing how to do something. Oh, wow, that person is very skilled. They have a lot of wisdom in knowing how to fix something or do something. Or it can also be, oh, that person's intelligent. They know a lot about a certain topic. They're wise. Additionally, there's another definition that talks about, oh, they're good at making something. They're a wise builder. And so there's different kinds of wisdom, and I'm going to go ahead and show this morning. So we have an owl, it's a very typical symbol to represent wisdom. Growing up, I've seen owls, and they always tend to represent wisdom. And now there's not that many of them. When's the last time you saw an owl? Or just you saw one sitting out in a tree. Have you seen an owl? Okay, So when I was growing up, I saw owls often, but 40 years later, it seems like they're becoming more and more rare. I don't see them very often. It seems like they've maybe gone extinct or less and less of them. But anyway, moving on with these different kinds of wisdom. So there's wisdom that's from above. And there's another kind of wisdom. There's wisdom that's from below. So there's two different kinds of wisdom. So I'm going to go ahead and explain this a little bit more in depth. And James identifies what these two different kinds of wisdom mean. And so you need to consider, are you practicing the wisdom that's from below, that's earthly? Or are you practicing the wisdom like just with the world's ideas, with the world's philosophies? Or are you focused on heavenly wisdom? Because these two are very distinct, and we're going to go into that this morning much more in depth. So first, my first point this morning, James talks about, in verse 13, he is writing about wisdom in action. James, he talks about this. He's like, okay, you say you have faith in God. Okay, where's the proof of that? Let me see your actions to back it up. Come on. Additionally, last week he talked about, hey, you just say, but come on, do it. Just do it. If you just take in the word and it goes one ear and out the other, the word is worthless. And so James emphasizes the criticalness in a person's life of putting it into action. And he says, hey, Christians, you must show good fruit. There must be good actions in your life. And many millions of people say, I'm a Christian. I got saved. I'm a follower. But they don't do any action that show that there's no good fruit in their lives. So what's wrong with that? And so James is reprimanding those individuals who say they're believers. And we've got to understand, too, that James grew up with Jesus Christ. They grew up together. James was the half-brother of Jesus Christ. And he took in what Jesus did. He saw what his brother did. And Jesus explained and showed and taught him. But James took in all that. He knew about Jesus Christ growing up. He saw Jesus obey his parents. And he saw that Jesus Christ didn't rebel against his parents, but that he followed the Ten Commandments and he honored his father and his mother. I believe that Jesus Christ always obeyed his parents in everything and honored them fully until he grew up, till he was 30, and then he started to preach the gospel. So James had seen the example of Jesus Christ for many years, and James had taken all that into his mind, into his heart. And so he's using that wisdom from Christ to reprimand the church. In James chapter 3, verse 13, it says, who among you is wise and understanding? Let him show by his good behavior. By his deeds. In gentleness of wisdom. So another translation is also humility, humbleness, meekness of wisdom. So this test tells us that there are certain things that true wisdom is. So we're going to go ahead and delve into that. Oops, it's a little bit higher than I expected. But true wisdom is an action. It is shown. Wisdom must be shown. It must be an action. You can't just be wise in your head and just have all the smarts, but it has to be shown. It has to be lived out. There has to be something involved. You have to get involved to show that one is truly wise. If a person says they're wise, but they don't do anything to show it, that wisdom is false. And then there's a second point. There's another test for wisdom. A person must have good conduct. The King James Version actually says conduct. And this is the idea of behavior. Your life. How you're living it out. Are you living a wise life? And then what it means your behavior, your actions show it. And then the third point this morning is deeds. A person's works that are involved. And so James writes this book And at this time, the church of believers are suffering. They are experiencing persecution, terrible, terrible persecution. And so James is going to them. He's like, I'm here to support you. I'm here for you. And he recognizes the sufferings. And sometimes people are like, oh, you're suffering. I'm just going to pray for you. And he's like, your prayers are not enough. You need to pray and you need to support them. You need to help people if you can help them. You need to get involved in their lives. And like, if a person's like, oh, I'll just pray for you, and they just take off, and they're like, oh, I'm just going to pray for that person. But James is saying, your actions need to prove it. And he's like, well, your brothers and sisters who are being persecuted, you need to get involved in their lives. You need to help them out. The camel's kneecap. So he talks like this idea of a camel's kneecap. It's tough, it's hard, so that the camel can bend over very easily, and its kneecap is very rough. James was known as the camel's kneecap because he was constantly in prayer. The church historically knew him as the one who prayed. His knees were always on the ground. He was constantly in prayer. James was known for a life of devotion and fellowship with God. He said, come on, show it by your deeds. Also, he said, humility was important. This word that's also translated gentleness. And all of these things show true wisdom. And so these four are the tests of true wisdom, of wisdom that's from above. And then, second, James goes on in the next section to give a warning about wisdom. Because wisdom has a negative perspective. God's wisdom from above is good, but then there's also false wisdom. So James is going to go ahead and expand on the dangers of wisdom. So he goes on to say, but if you harbor, if you take into yourself bitterness, envy, jealousy, and then selfish ambition, this is the idea of pride in our hearts. Ooh, there are some there's a sharp reprimand. If you're bitter, if you're jealous, if you're having selfish ambition, he says, do not boast about or deny the truth. Do not boast about or deny the truth. He talks about these things inside of your heart when you're boasting. You're thinking, I got the wisdom. The wisdom is from me. I got the skills. I'm the one who's with the smarts. I can do it. This kind of person, James is saying, no, this kind of person is involved in earthly wisdom. He says, this earthly, what is so-called, what is from below, this wisdom, as it were, it does not come down from heaven, but is earthly. This kind of wisdom is earthly. And we see this very distinct difference. There's one that's from above, and then there's one that's from below. We're going to focus right now on what this kind of wisdom that is earthly. It is worldly. It is of the world. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, 2 Thessalonians talks about this. It talks about the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. Wisdom on the earth wisdom for how to create wealth, for how to run a business, how to be comfortable, how to enjoy life, how to enjoy sin, this kind of worldly wisdom. And there are many people who are very smart at setting up businesses, all these things. They're wise in the ways of the world. But these things are spiritually dead. The idea of unspiritual is the idea of spiritually dead. The world's wisdom is spiritually dead. It profits nothing. Remember how James said faith without works is dead? Now he's saying, wisdom without any kind of action, without any proof to back it up, is also dead. So James is emphasizing this again. He's saying it's spiritually dead. Wisdom without works is dead, just like faith without works is dead. If you just have the world's wisdom, it is spiritually dead. And he says these things in English are demonic. They're devilish. He says this is the work of the world. This is the work of the devil. This is the devil's work. It's not from above, it's from below. This kind of wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, and of the devil. These things are demon-like. They are this kind of so-called wisdom. James wants us to notice the two different kinds of wisdom. And Christians today sometimes kind of mix the two. They want a little heavenly wisdom, they want a little earthly wisdom. They try to meld them together. But James reminds us there needs to be a distinct division between heavenly wisdom and God's wisdom.
So all of the things of the earth, all of the lusts of the flesh and the filth of the earth, all of these three things, earthly, unspiritual, and of the devil, these are false wisdom. This is untrue. It is not good wisdom, the wisdom of the world. Because the wisdom of the world accepts everything. It's an unholy threesome. So thinking of all of these things, these different things, why? Why would it be considered so? And James is going to explain it further for us. He says, for wherever it is, or because, the word for here means because, wherever you have envy, we have envy within your heart, or you have a selfish ambition or pride for yourself. All of these things cause problems in the world. And all of these things, when they come into our hearts, this lust and this envy and this pride and this selfishness, there, it says here, there will you find disorder. And the list is long of all of these things where it causes confusion and it causes evil practices within the world. And all of these things tend to get muddled around in our minds. But we need to separate them into a heavenly wisdom and to an earthly wisdom, and understand how different they are and that you cannot superimpose one upon the other. It just doesn't set up that way. And we see all of the problems that come with this false wisdom, emotional disorder, people having emotions that aren't right, and they still think that this is a wisdom that they have. Or people with intellectual disorder, they think they're so smart. And again, it creates this muddling. Physical problems as well, considered disorder. Marriage problems. Because the things that go on in the world, these earthly influence about how to make everything better, how to make your wife happy. I mean, can it really, all of the things that you can offer to them? You know, they give them a huge diamond ring, shiny and sparkly, practically takes your eye out. It's just so great. These are all things that the world offers. This is all of what the world thinks is right. You know, you go around looking at your ring, and then you look around and you think, hey, wait. Hey, my husband's cheating on me. What? How did that happen? Well, I do have the ring. You know, that's pretty good. But, you know, really, take off the ring and throw it away. What have you got? You have nothing. The marriage is in chaos. It is not a good one. You know, when you get it, you think, oh my gosh, this is really great. Everything is perfect. My life is just going wrong. And then you realize, oh, I'm not satisfied. And the man goes out and looks for a different woman, or the woman goes out and looks for a different man. Because how to improve your marriage, all of these things, are to stop. First, the world causes a stupid influence on you. You are to follow the straight way. You are to follow the wisdom of the Lord. Not to go down and look at the world and see what the world has to say, because that's fake. That's just false. You know, once you are married, it requires a serious wisdom, or the marriage is no good. And we see family disorders as well nowadays. Children rebelling. All of the things that are happening in this world. You can see how the list just goes on and on. Social disorder, work disorder, financial disorder. And really all of this, what it is referred to as, is dysfunctional. And the reason for that is because people are taking to and accepting the wisdom of the world, this selfishness that causes a chaos within one's life. And there are so many different kinds of these evil practices that are going on in the world. I mean, look at the list. It's just as long as could be. And it causes a dysfunctional life. And this is what the world offers to us. And James goes on to say, you know, this so much for this wisdom. You know, the kind of wisdoms that the world will offer you. We are to take care and to be careful. Because what does it cause? Bitterness. Envy. Jealousy. A selfish ambition for oneself. Hypocrisy. All of these are what the world's wisdom offers us, if we accept it. Now, James in chapter 3, when he has spoken of these things, when he speaks about the wisdom, about the good works that show, and he's giving the warning about wisdom as well, he has something very important to say about this in verses 17 and 18. He speaks of the wisdom from above, meaning godly wisdom, because God is above, or God is thought of as above in the heavens. Heavenly wisdom that is given to us. And this is what we are to go for. This is what we are to follow and to wish for. Not earthly wisdom, but that from above. And look at the listings and how different they are from that which the earth offers. The first thing, the first important factor to recognize is that wisdom from heaven is pure, holy, leads to a good life. All of the filth of sin should be put aside for this purity, because the wisdom from heaven is pure. And how many Christians can you see nowadays, do you see, that are really pure? They're not involved in a clean life. And James explains that to be pure like God is what we are to aspire to. This holy life, to be godly as God is. Wisdom from above. It's important to remember that it will be pure. And these are the different signs for it. To wish to go back to sinful practices and to fall back into that and go into that way of life No, turn to God and look to Him. That is what true wisdom is. That is the vision of wisdom that we should have. Not the evil that the world will hand us. It is not anything like heavenly wisdom. And James goes on to say that it is peace-loving. Wisdom from heaven is peace-loving. God said the greatest commandment was to love God above all, and then to love your neighbor as yourself. And that, in Galatians, is saying that this, and to be peace-loving is important. All of these are interconnected. Because when you find true wisdom, then you will find peace. And then it goes on to say that peace is gentle. People are accepting. Nowadays we see that, people are always in each other's faces. They're always confrontational. They're always having arguments. There's rage going on everywhere. People are always having these terrible, terrible arguments. And you see that in the world. And we're not to join into that. True wisdom is not following in and causing the argument and keeping going and getting that discussion going until it just blows up into something terrible. When you see that, think, no, gentleness, calmness, meekness. With that action, your enemy will realize that you are wise and he's the squirrely one. So when we see all of these things, if you have a fight, you hit somebody, you're going to go to jail. And road rage or whatever is involved in all of these things. If this person had practiced this gentility, this meekness, that wouldn't have happened. So we look to this statue here, a person of reason. One that makes good judgment. Not that just jumps into anything, but sometimes when somebody is telling a story, I will step back and I will watch and I will see all the discussion that's going on and everything that's being involved in this discussion until at the last, then I will step in and I will give a word and I will give an answer or reply or something instead of being in there in the fray of it all. Because I wait for the exact minute and think about the reasoning and before I make the decision of what it is that I'm going to say. And that's what we are to do. We are supposed to be careful how we answer, how we respond, how we proceed in a given situation. And it says, full of mercy and good fruit. This picture here shows the grapes. But what it's showing is that we are not to be mean. We are not to be unkind. And we are not to go after people, to belittle them, but we are to move on in mercy and to be kind with them. Like with children. If they spill something on the floor or whatever, instead of thinking, oh gosh, grandfather's here, he's going to be so mad that I spilled things on the floor. And I'll say, no, come and help me, get some paper towels, let's clean this up. And they'll look at me and think, wow. Instead of yelling at them and it just yelling, it's not worth it, it's just not important. We show mercy and we show kindness and we help them and get them involved in it, in the solution for it, or maybe stay in the kitchen or not in the living room. But our hearts are to be full of this mercy and this pity for others. And then you see people that are often, for instance, sitting on the fence, think, oh yeah, or they change their minds, oh, no, I'll go with this opinion. No, I think I'll go with that one, or yeah, maybe that's a better way to go. And you see them vacillating between, you see them all the time. I do it, sometimes, go someplace to eat. If you're going to go to Panda, the line's really, really long, and I think, I'm not going to go there, I'm not going to stand in that line. So I'll go out to someplace where there's a shorter line. to get into that, because I hate long lines. Or maybe go through the drive-through. And once you're in there, then you're really stuck because, you can't get out again. And the point is that, once you indecisive about what they really, really wanted, they can't make the decision like really, really quick. But our faith should be with our wisdom. There should be no wavering of that. It should continue on and just go straight through. No doubts, no wavering or indecisiveness. And then it says also without hypocrisy. How what they say doesn't match what they're doing. And so that's hypocritical as people go on. But we are to continue on without this hypocrisy. And these are the things, all the goodness that comes from wisdom from above. The wisdom from heaven, the most important of all. The earthly wisdom compared to the from above. Which wisdom is the more important? Let's look at this. Again, the wisdom from above is pure. It's peaceable, peace-loving. It is gentle and meek. It is reasonable. It is filled with mercy and filled with good fruit. And that's why it is called the wisdom from above, this heavenly wisdom. Because all of these things are meant to encourage people, to support people. It's also unwavering, without doubt. And it is without hypocrisy. It continues on in the truth without lies, without deceit, without bragging. It's very strong, this wisdom from above. So I added this at the last, the verse 18. It says, peacemakers who sow in peace. You see this person, and then you see another person as well, and maybe they're always at odds and they're always arguing. So you go to them and you listen to both sides of the story. And then perhaps you can bring them together so that successfully they can become friends again and they can become peace-loving. And that is the idea of bringing them together. You don't just go and say, I'm going to support this person, or no, I'll go support that person. Because the worst about the division, like the Republicans and the Democrats, what we had in the elections. I mean, such a terrible, terrible division that we had with the elections and everything. And some people say, well, I support the Republicans. And then the Democrats are always like going at them like, and then the Republicans are like going at the Democrats like, and then more and more you just see that it's just terrible. It's been going on now, in the media, and the media supports it too. Maybe they support the Democrats, and Fox supports the Republicans. So you see, and if you look at the media, you see how they're biased and how they're supporting it and how, they talk about their leaders. And so you just see this, and all of this should not be happening in a Christian's life where they support one or the other and they just have this great big argument going all the time, because that does not show wisdom. Both of them should be equal. Just. White, black and white, not just sort of, no, one's not better than the other, because there's all this one-upmanship. I'm better than you. No, I'm better than you are. Abraham Lincoln, we know him. He was a president, 16th president. And he said, under God, we are all equal. We are but one. Lincoln said that. So it says peacemakers. He was a peacemaker. And he was willing to try to contribute towards peace, to bring people together, to get them to work in harmony. So it says here, peacemakers who sow in peace. We see the picture, it matches the picture. It says, they will raise a harvest of righteousness. So that which you sow, so shall ye reap. more and more. In Galatians chapter 6, verse 7 and 8, it says, don't be misled. It says you cannot mock the justice of God. For if you sow the things of the flesh, you will reap the things of the flesh. You will reap this division. You will get back what you put out. It says you will always harvest what you plant. Those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature will harvest decay and death from that sinful nature. But those who live to please the Spirit will harvest life everlasting from the Spirit. For if one sows peace, he will reap the blessings of peace. And this is the blessing of his wisdom. But those that sow the division of the flesh will reap destruction in their lives. In marriages, in families, with your children, in your finances, entire lives are disrupted with chaos. For it says here that peacemakers who sow in peace raise a harvest of righteousness. And you can see on the left hand how the hay has been brought up into bales. In Matthew chapter 5 it says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will see God." So you may be thinking, all of this, how does this work? How do you do this?
Comes from God's word, the Bible. This is the answer. This is the solution to wisdom that's from above. The word of God is what we need to study, what we need to examine. And that's going to give us the wisdom that we want. For example, sometimes a person has a problem with their car, they don't know what to do, so they take it to a mechanic. And so the mechanic does an examination. And they have a manual. The mechanic has a manual. They can troubleshoot. And basically, they can figure out what's up, what codes or whatever, and they can figure out what are the options for what's wrong. So they fix one thing, they fix another thing, they fix it. And then they can oftentimes fix and get the vehicle to continue running. People's assumptions, man's assumptions are worthless. We need to focus on the book that God has left for us. This is what's teaching is important, not people's opinions. We need to follow the Bible, the Word of God. This is going to give us the wisdom. In verse 13 it says, "Who is wise and understanding among you?" And I added book wise and understanding among you. "Let him show by his good life, by his deeds done in humility that comes from wisdom." That's the word of God's answer. So now we're going to have our conclusion of our message this morning. And there's just a few questions I want you to ask yourself. So I want each and every one of you here to consider, how about you? Do you have the kind of wisdom that's from above or the kind of wisdom that's from below? When you examine yourself, are you full of the world's wisdom or are you full of heavenly wisdom? Which kind of wisdom do you find inside of yourself? Beautiful picture of a lighthouse, and we'll take a look here at our final verse from James chapter 3, verse 13. It says, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show by their life, by deeds done in humility that comes from wisdom." Let us